Oh my god, I am so done with Mindustry. I have died 3 times, and this is the fourth time I'm recording this. Well, either way, stay tuned to the end of this video to hear my opinions on Mindustry 7.0 overall. So let's actually start talking about this map itself. Origin is the hardest map in the entire of Mindustry. If you think the previous maps are hard, well, this map is 10 times harder because you will die very easily if you are not careful and you are not observant at all. Now to start off, there are 8 different cores, probably more, but you can place down 8 additional cores once you defeat all the bases. But either way, let's actually start talking about strategy and how I beat this map. So, as usual, the first step is to gather more resources, and of course, one of the resources has to be on another island because it's the hardest map, of course, it has to be. Now, that resource in particular is tungsten, and tungsten is extremely important. And how do you get the tungsten? Well, you need to use something called a unit loader, which apparently is not expressed in the tutorial at all, or rather it's not been taught to me. I might have skipped it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't. So regardless, you have to use a unit loader in order to get the resources, or rather to transfer the tungsten from that small island to your core. And besides, the tungsten is useful for building ground troops later, but we'll get to that later. By the way, now that we have built up our, or rather increased the amount of resources that we have obtained, the next thing we need to do is to get our power source, or rather improve our power source, because we are going to need a lot of power. Now, you're going to need to get the lava sort of and the archesite. Well, the archesite is located on the top right hand corner of your base. But the problem is that there are 2 bases right next to it. One is on the northwest and the other is on the northeast, so both of them is going to try and attack your base. So what you need to do is you need to, well, start building it ASAP. And then for now, because we have not reached the first tier of sort of unit spawns, we don't really have to worry about enemies coming to our base. But later on, when you start getting your air units, you should probably station 1 or 2 air units at that location and check on it every once in a while, because that is the most important spot in the entire game. If you do not protect that spot, if you do not protect your archesite collection site, you will die very easily. What I recommend is that you protect it with 2 air units rather than just 1, because, well, one of them will probably die easily and 2 is always better than 1, and besides you don't need to attack any bases very soon, except for the base on the top, but of course we'll get to that later. And speaking of which, once we started getting our power, I've decided to start building my tier 4 air units ASAP, because our entire defense is going to rely on just these units. We don't want to rely on the normal building defenses because A, they are way too expensive, B, they consume way too many resources in terms of their ammo, and C, it's probably not even enough to deal with the tier 5 enemy units later on. So our best bet is to go for units, because they are probably your best bet at defending everything. They are good for defenses and they're good at offenses as well. So of course, like I said, we're going to start getting the air units. Now, I thought about getting the tier 5 units, but then I realized that they're just way too expensive and they also take too long for you to build. Now granted, even though they're more expensive and take too long to build, they are extremely powerful, but I still don't think it's worth it. So yeah, that's why I went for tier 4 units instead. After building the air units, I started building the tank units as soon as possible because they are quicker and cheaper than mech. Now, of course, I wanted to get mech units after as well, but the problem is we don't have enough real estate for me to build the mech factory. So we'll get that later when we get rid of the top base. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the base that is north of us. Now, the general idea for dealing with all the bases in this map is for you to snip away the edge of the base using the air units, and then use your land units to help you, well, charge through the defenses and go straight for the core, because in some bases you have the annoying air defenses which are extremely difficult to penetrate through. So what you want to do instead is get your ground units to breach through there, because if there's a lot of air defenses, there's a chance that there's not a lot of ground defenses, so you can pretty much breeze through the base if you have ground units for the most part. And remember, going for the core immediately is very important. Try to ignore the other defenses if you can. That being said, don't completely ignore them or else they will kill your units very quickly. But if you can get to the core quickly and defeat the core ASAP, you should probably do that. Because once you destroy the core, most of the defenses around the core will also get destroyed, so you're practically killing two birds with one stone. And now with the top base gone, we're going to go ahead and sell all the resources necessary to build mech units. And we're going to try our best not to rely from any resources from the base below. And if you want to, go ahead and build a second power station, because you pretty much need power for powering the top base independently, but also sharing it later with the lower base. Power is very important, as I mentioned earlier, so yeah, do keep that in mind. So once you build the mech units, and oh yeah, don't forget to change its spawn location somewhere, otherwise it's going to clog up your unit spawn, and if there are enemies in your unit spawn, it actually won't build anything, so yeah, just be careful of that. Simple noob mistake to make, but it's easily avoidable. But either way, once we get our mech units up and running, all we need to do is slowly snipe away all the bases around us. Now there's a lot of bases, so you should probably tackle this one base at a time, and do so slowly and strategically. Don't go for it. Don't go for any bases like immediately. Now the next important base that I want to touch on is the base on the southeast. Now once you clear the base on the southeast, you'll notice two things. First, that is where you get your thorium, and your thorium is very important because that is where A, you need to get your eruption drills, and B is for you to build important stuff later on. So I had to unfortunately sell some of my old eruption drills so that I could afford the thorium necessary to mine thorium, but it's a worthy investment. At most you just lose a few of your eruption drills and you pause your unit building for like 3 to 4 minutes, but it shouldn't really affect your defense as much. It's more important that you get your thorium first and build your units later. And then the other thing you should know about the southeast base is that it's a gateway for a lot of units, and probably the most important thing is that there's a long-range missile that can hit the southeast base, especially the core, if you're trying to build it. So what you want to do is build a wall around it, or maybe even surround it with units if you want to. And then what you can do is start building the core once you have surrounded the area and protect it from the long-range missile at the south of the base. Now at this point, I've decided to place a few units at the south, near the edge of the south base, so that we could chip away at its walls. And keep in mind, the tier 5 ground unit from there is going to spawn very soon, so you probably need your units there to protect against it anyway. Now once you defeat the enemy cores, you need to go ahead and place your own core down. Two reasons for this. One is to increase your resource and units limit, and the other is for you to, well, sort of serve as a sort of buffer zone in case your enemies decide to, I don't know, go straight for your main core, which actually did happen to me. I was lucky enough to survive that, thankfully, because I have other cores and I was able to rebuild from there. But the increased amount of resources is also very important, and not to mention the increased number of units, which will serve a very important purpose. I don't need to state what that purpose is. Now the tier 5 tanks will come out on the second last tier of enemy production escalation, which should occur around 2 to 3 hours into your gameplay, and that includes all the pausing that you will have to do, by the way, if you're fast enough. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, do get your units to defend at the intersection. Ideally you want both air and ground units, but keep in mind you need to build a lot of repair points, and these repair points will get constantly destroyed, so do keep an eye out. And don't think you can get away easily by building a build tower, because guess what, the build tower will also get destroyed because it's version 7.0 and the game will do whatever it wants to make your life a lot harder. Now from here on out, once you're at the second last tier of enemy production escalation, you need to check your entire base frequently, like at the very least once every 10 minutes, 5 minutes if you can, or rather once you finish building every small section. of defenses. This is to ensure that your base don't get destroyed. I mean, you can also check the mini-map on the top right hand corner, but I don't find that reliable, and besides it's way too small to actually check for enemy units. So I decided to, you know, actually manually check by pausing and then moving my screen around, or rather you can also move your unit around, but that will waste some time as well. So do whatever you want, but just make sure that you check every once in a while. You should also place one air unit at each important point, especially at the cores, to prevent the repair bots from the enemy to actually repair anything, and also deter enemies, because surprisingly enemies will be deterred, or at least some enemies will be deterred from going to that area if you place your own units at that area. I'm not sure why that's the case, but it is how it is. So use that to your advantage. Now, the hardest bases to deal with are the southmost base and the eastmost base, because they have the charge op defenses that can obliterate, well, essentially everything. Now, what you need to take note of is the tier 5 ground units comes from the south base, and the tier 5 air units come from the east base. You don't have to worry about the tier 5 air unit until the final enemy production escalation, which you can tell because by the end of the enemy production escalation, it will show the amount of cores left you have to defeat. In my case, it's 4 cores, so that is when tier 5 units will start to spawn, and pray that they don't go straight for your bases if you're lucky. If you're unlucky though, you should probably start building some air defenses to help you out. I don't remember why I mentioned this earlier, but please remember to constantly export your data every half an hour in case you die, because you don't want to lose your progress since Mindustry has zero autosave or recovery system. And you might think that you don't need it, but by the time you die, you'll realize how much you regret it. And yeah, it's a shame, but it's better safe than sorry. Even though Mindustry doesn't have a good autosave system, just save yourself the trouble. Just take the extra few seconds or minutes to back up your data. Now, as for the south base, as I mentioned earlier, I had to let the air units attack the walls for like half an hour, and then eventually it will eliminate the op defenses. Now, if you think that that's too slow or for some reason you can't do it, that's just fine. All you need to do is just save up your ground tank units and then go ahead and charge at the op defense. You will lose a lot of units in the progress, but on the right side, you will be able to get rid of that base, or rather get rid of that defense, because once you get rid of the charge op defense, you will be able to get rid of the rest of the base. It's not that difficult once you get rid of that defense. Now, the original plan for me dealing with the east base was to wait until I save up for the maximum number of troops. However, this didn't go to plan because there were a bunch of tier 5 air units waiting around, and I sort of accidentally triggered them without my consent, so they started attacking my base, and I tried to defend against them, but there are just a lot of tier 5 units from the leftover spawns and a bunch of tier 4 units as well, so that didn't help things. And yeah, I didn't have enough manpower, not including the ground and air defenses total. So yeah, I realized that my only hope of surviving was for me to go for an all-out assault on the eastmost core and pray that it actually worked. So what I did was I didn't bother sending my air units to the east base, because I know they're going to get obliterated immediately. So what I did instead is I created a two-pronged attack system. So I had my tanks on the rightmost side of the wall, and I had my mechs on the leftmost side of the wall, while they're hugging there. The general idea is I kind of want the tanks to distract the op defense, and in the meantime, I was sending my mechs to go deep into the base, bypass the walls, and then just get rid of the op defenses. Of course, you can send in the mechs then to get rid of the pipelines connecting the op defenses from any resources, so it doesn't have any ammo, or rather it can't even shoot anything. So yeah, you can do that as well. But yeah, once you get rid of that defense, which I barely did by the way, then yeah, you can get rid of literally the rest of the base. The core is slightly deeper inside. You will encounter a slightly more defenses, but outside of that, it's not that difficult. And once you're done with that, boom, you have cleared this sector. Now, fortunately, clearing this sector also cleared out the rest of the enemy tier 5 units that were still attacking my base, and that was extremely lucky for me. But this also ended up destroying half my base, which I eventually rebuilt after I finished recording this video. And speaking of which, this video is not over. let's actually get into my review of Mindustry 7.0 overall. Believe it or not, despite me procrastinating for forever, I actually enjoyed beating this map, and I sort of enjoyed Mindustry 7.0 overall, but I also procrastinated trying to play and complete it, and it's only in this video that I realized why. It's because the mindset that I had uh, between 6.0 and 7.0 needed to change. So when I first played Mindustry in version 6.0, I went in with the mindset that Mindustry is just a simple, casual, and chill based building game with sort of defending against enemies as sort of a side quest that serves also as a win condition. And that's to say, version 6.0 gave you a lot of freedom, and it wasn't too harsh on the defense side of things, which means that you actually have more of a chill time or rather fun time building stuff rather than focusing on defending your things. But with 7.0, it introduced a lot of restrictions in case you guys didn't realize. For example, the placement of towers, nodes itself, power nodes especially, that's the easiest example to make out of. Resource limitations, also new way to obtain resources, etc. The rules are even clearly shown to you. So you kind of need to experiment with it a lot compared to version 6.0. But the biggest change in version 7.0 was that now you didn't have much freedom in terms of base building. So instead of a chill game where you can pretty much do whatever you want, you have to think about it as a tower defense game, similar to the vein of games like Bloons TD6. And yeah, because it's focused a lot more on the offensive than actually building a base, you can't play version 7.0 casually, or at the very least you can't play Erikir casually, unlike version 6.0. And this kind of upsetted me because I just wanted to play a casual resource gathering game. It's for this very reason that I avoided playing Factorial. I played Factorial once, never liked it, refunded the game, because it's just way too complex and requires a lot of thinking. Not that I don't want to think a lot, I do think a lot when playing Bloons TD6, but there's just some times where you want to just play a chill game to, take a break from your gaming experience, which I know is a juxtaposition, but yeah, sometimes it's nice to take a break from, a long, exhausting session of playing games. And yeah, I didn't realize that I had to change my mindset until I played this map. So this is why I got so aggressive in so many of my 7.0 videos. This is why I gave up so easily, because I needed to change my mindset, and I did not realize that. But it should have been more obvious from the start when 7.0 was out. It happened on a completely different planet. All the rule sets were different, but I didn't realize that I had to change my mindset about the game as well. I thought that 7.0 was just same old Mindustry, still a chill game, but with different rule sets altogether. But I didn't realize that it turned more into a defensive focused game rather than a chill based defense game. Like even the threat eradication map in Sepulho, which is version 6.0, it wasn't that difficult overall. Like there was a bit of strategy, sure, but you also had quite some fun with dealing with the base building, like across long ranges of islands. But with this threat eradication map in version 7.0, that's to say this map origin, instead of having fun with base building, you need to focus more on your defenses, which in this case you need to focus all your resources on building as many units as possible. And sure, you might find this fun. I did eventually find it fun because this video is out, but the fact that it took me 2 months to actually get to playing this map again, that really says a lot. So yeah, lesson learned, I guess. I should have changed my mindset earlier, but I didn't, and I only just realized that now. So as to the future of Mindustry in this channel, will I continue playing Mindustry? Oh yes, I definitely will. Will I continue to make videos? Well, I don't know, but I want to. But if I want to continue making videos, that requires me to accept this new mindset of playing. That requires me to think about Mindustry as not a casual game anymore, but as an actual tower defense game. So I really don't know. I might not. This may be the last Mindustry video I put out. It may not be the last video that I put out, but whatever happens, I hope that we still have fun together going forward.